almost everybody that I have read, talked to, heard about believes that, of course, it's Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears, and then, of course, it's Jaden Daniels to the Washington Commanders. And then after that, that's where it really gets interesting because many people kind of feel like, maybe the Patriots don't feel like they're ready yet. They have to build a team. And, again, to look in the future and to try to figure out what quarterback is coming, the last couple times that I think this has happened, one would be this year because I think after Caleb Williams won the Heisman, everybody knew that he was going to be the number one pick in this draft. So whoever got the number one pick was going to be lucky enough to draft what many people believe is a generational player. And when you watch him play, you can see why.
Yeah.
All right. So, and that happens to be the Bears. They did a great job last year with the trade with the Panthers to get up into this year's draft. Honestly, this should be the Panthers pick is what it should be. And, the Panthers screwed up royally last year. But after number 2, what do the Patriots do? And where do they go? Where does J.J. McCarthy go? Where does Drake May go? Where does Michael Penix go? Where does Bo Nix go? And there is a feeling that all of those guys are going to end up going in the first round, which is amazing because I saw, there's so many mock drafts. I mean, I
stopped looking at it.
Right. It will just make your head spin.
Yeah.
And, and there are a lot of really good players in this draft, but I think it's quarterbacks, it's wide receivers, it's offensive tackles, then come maybe an edge rusher or two, a defensive tackle, a couple defensive backs, cornerbacks. So I just think that it's going to be fascinating to see what happens between pick 3 and pick 6 in this draft. And whether or not the Cardinals believe that they could trade the 4th pick and still remain in range to get the wide receiver they want. In order for that to happen, I do believe that they can't drop below 6. So everybody says, well, the Giants don't really have the draft capital. But what the Giants do have is they have that number 6 pick. And it is in the top 10, so you can still get a very, very solid, if not can't-miss player at number 6. So that's why maybe Arizona, the Patriots, the Chargers, all I could see, trading back possibly to the Giants because normally smoke is fire.
Oh, yeah, and I do believe that all these teams that are quarterback needy, especially the top 3 that we have been talking about that have the assets to trade up, the Giants, the Vikings, and the Broncos, I fully believe that each one of those teams would be taking a quarterback if they were 1, 2, and 3 and like those guys and would like to trade up. It's just a matter of what that price tag is going to be. And I also believe that the New England Patriots, when they say they're open for business, if there's a deal out there that they feel like they can't turn down, they will take that deal. So is a general manager, either Joe Shane or Kwesi Adolfo Mensah out in Minnesota or Sean Payton in his front office out there, so obsessed with one of these guys that they end up doing one of these massive deals and sort of punting next year's draft and maybe a first rounder after that to get the guy. And if it's not Caleb Williams, and I like Jaden Daniels a lot, but if it's not Caleb Williams and it's not Jaden Daniels, and we're talking about if it's Drake May or J.J. McCarthy, are you forgoing your next couple of drafts for one of those two guys? Or is that just a overrate because we're in desperate need of a young guy?
I think it's overrate because you're in desperate need of a young guy. And both Drake May and J.J. McCarthy bring different things to the table, of course. And J.J. McCarthy is a big quarterback. He's very athletic. I could see Brian Daboll being enamored with him.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. The J.J. McCarthy thing is really the kind of wild card here because of what Jim Harbaugh said as he was leaving Michigan and going to the Chargers. He basically said, look, this guy's a winner. This is somebody that, man, is going to go in the first round. And when he said that, nobody in their wildest dreams thought that he was a first rounder, let alone a top 10 pick.
Yeah. I mean, during the season, too, when this team was rolling and even going into the national championship game, even right after the national championship game, nobody was talking about him being a first rounder. I mean, speaking of mock drafts, Daniel Jeremiah, who's a guy on the NFL Network, one of the most respected draft guys there is right now. I went to his mock draft right after the national championship game. He did not have J.J. McCarthy going in the first round. And that's the stuff that scares me. And I know that pro days and combines and interviews can change things, but up until that point after the season where combines and pro days and interviews change things, NFL GMs and people who were evaluating the draft weren't looking at him as a savior at the quarterback position. And what happens is these GMs like, damn, like the guy I really like, I'm not going to be able to get.
You know what's amazing? Let's just talk about Tom Brady for a second when he came out in the draft.
Yeah.
We've all seen the photo. What we didn't see, or what maybe the Patriots saw, Bill Belichick saw, was a guy that seemed to be really committed to the game of football and to becoming a great quarterback. Now, if they would have seen it and they would have felt about that,
they would have taken him in the first round.
They would have, but he fell to the 6th round.
Yeah.
So the point being is that this is a crapshoot.
Yes.
And I think that Chicago's in a good situation. The only thing I worry about with Chicago right now is what their quarterback room looks like when Caleb Williams gets there. I would love to have a veteran quarterback presence in there.
And with the right personality.
I mean, yeah, because you're going to have to deal with his personality.
Exactly.
And that's one of the reasons why they have, Keenan Allen now. They traded for Keenan Allen, and he's on a 1-year deal. That's it. So they also have the 9th pick, and that's why many people think it's going to be another wide receiver, because Keenan Allen's on a 1-year deal, and he does have a relationship with Caleb Williams. So that could be a good thing for Caleb. Again, like with all of these kids, it's the same thing. It's the personality, it's the coaching staff, it's the organization where they're going to, as to whether or not ultimately they're going to be successful.
Yeah, and you look at some of these drafts and you get a couple of guys out of the same draft that are really good. Sometimes there's 3 like Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger, but a lot of times there's either one or none. And you look back at, the Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson draft right now, and that looks like a horrendous one. And then you go back at some of these guys in the first round, from J.P. Lossman to Christian Ponder to Achilles Smith. We can go over and over and over. I mean, if I was an NFL general manager, I would hate the draft, because chances are what I do on that draft night is going to get me fired. Because especially we're at the top of the draft and a quarterback is in your sights. And there's probably, okay, if you believe that, as many people do, that Caleb Williams is close to a can't miss. You can't even barely say can't miss anymore.
Well, I would say, he's in that class.
Like Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Troy Aikman, guys that they knew were going to be the first pick overall in the draft.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it was going to take them, the school of hard knocks. I mean, they all went through it. He'll go through it, most likely go through it. I don't know if he'll have a year like C.J. Stroud just had.
Sure.
I mean, that's why the C.J. Stroud year was so, startling. You expect, okay, we're going to be good, but are we going to be 17 games worth of good? And when you look at his body of work last year, nobody expected that, especially with the Houston Texans, especially with a new coach, especially with the way that they drafted
the history of Ohio State quarterbacks, too. Everybody was bringing that up, which I think is not really fair, but that was another knock on him. So, all right, so if you believe that Caleb Williams is in that close to a can't miss category, then after that, if you think that he's going to hit, the odds of another one of these guys hitting right after that is going to be slim. So you've got, it's the classic line of, are you in love with Drake May, or are you in love with the idea of Drake May? And the idea being, I've got this super talented kid who's got all the measurables, and he's going to be the face of my franchise. He's a good-looking kid. He's tall. He can throw the ball, and I'm going to get my hands on him as an offensive guy like Brian Daboll or Kevin O'Connell or Sean Payton. I'm going to get my hands on him. I'm going to turn him into a superstar. Or is it, this guy's so good that we just got to make sure that we put him in the right spots and he will be a superstar, as opposed to being a project? And you can't be a project anymore in today's NFL, it seems like. Coaches refuse to do it. Under extreme circumstances, do you have real projects that they sit and make sure that they can season a little bit?
I got to tell you, I wish these kids could sit. I really do. Like Bryce Young was right out there, right on the field last year, and it was an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
And you just hope that he comes back this year. He'll have a better understanding of what NFL training camp is all about. He'll have an understanding about how he fits in the team. There's so much indecision that goes into all of this when these kids first start. And that's why, To me, like Jaden Daniels he is like a rocket ship. That's how explosive he is. But that doesn't mean that that's going to transfer to the NFL field right away. I mean, he's got to watch it. He's got to learn it. He's got to feel it. And that's a team that I don't want him starting right now. I want them to take him, but I want him to at least sit and let whoever else they have on that roster, by the time we get to training camp, maybe they'll have a veteran there that they could play for 5 or 6 games, and maybe the team is 2-3. It's not doing well. But now Jaden Daniels has sat there and he's watched, and he just can't wait to get on the field because he really does truly have an understanding of what it's like to be an NFL quarterback. I'm telling you, it is so hard. My first year, I just thought that was it. I can't do this. And then my second year, I came back. I had a completely different understanding of the offense, completely different understanding of how I could read defenses and things of that nature. And then when I ultimately took over, it clicked. And I was lucky. It happened to me in my second year. And then think about Phil Sims's kind of like arc of his career. Like, he was drafted in the first round, and it didn't go so well the first couple of years. And he had injuries, and, they decided to go with Scott Bruner, and then he got to come back. And then finally, he settled in, and he figured it out, and he had the right coach. And that's like Patrick Mahomes getting drafted by Kansas City was like such a match made in heaven.
Oh, it's perfect because you also had one of the great offensive coaches in football, but you also had a successful offense at that time that was winning games. That's the only thing that keeps that first-round quarterback on the bench, is if you've got a quarterback that's playing well and the team is winning. And generally, when you draft a quarterback high like that, your team stinks. So the only situation that I could see where that actually goes on, where you draft a guy and then have him sit, but the team is winning. I mean, people are going to say I'm saying this because I'm a fan, but I'm not, because I'm not saying it because I'm a fan, because I'm always have a negative take on them. Might actually be the Minnesota Vikings, where they could draft a guy, and believe it or not, Sam Darnold could be competent enough with all those weapons that they have and a defense that was really, really good last year to have them in the mix where they can keep whoever they draft at bay for a little bit, as opposed to starting off the season 1-5 and the fan base says, what the hell are we doing? Put that quarterback in.
But you have a good offensive coach, a head coach.
Right.
And the head coach understands probably better than anybody in the NFL that, look, as a former quarterback, I know how difficult this is. And the last thing I want to do is I want to put this kid out on the field and expect him to take off and run like he's coming right out of college, and he's running the same offense. So it is such a crapshoot. It really, truly is. But I kind of believe that Caleb Williams now going to the Bears with everything that they've done here this offseason, he should have success. He should start week 1.
Oh, he will. He's the guy that will, and it makes sense. It would kind of be crazy if he didn't. Something would go wrong.
Man, but what a difference for him. And wait till he leaves USC and goes to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, well, if he's going to be great and he's one of those great ones, then those things should not rock his world and knock him off his pedestal. He should thrive in those situations. And just, one thing to think about, too, as we continue to talk about the Giants in the draft, if they don't draft a quarterback this year and you don't believe in Daniel Jones, where are they getting the next quarterback? Next year's draft when they suck again?
It'll be next year's draft.
This is going to be the same regime after that?
It'll be the free agent. That's why the regime. That's why everybody does believe that they want to trade up and they want to get their quarterback of the future and then restart the franchise again. I kind of feel like with everything that they're doing, unfortunately for Joe Shane, when he inherited the Giants and he inherited Daniel Jones, what he had to do is he had to piecemeal the team.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like with the trade for Brian Burns and some of the things that now he's done in free agency and also in his own draft since he's been here, he's been trying to rebuild the team. But you can't really rebuild the team unless you have the guy behind center that you believe in.
Yes.
I mean, and look, Rich Eisen said it. It's Jordan Renan said it, and everybody else has said it. And while I do feel empathy for Daniel Jones and what he's got to listen to and what he's got to deal with right now.
He's had his opportunity and he got paid.
He got paid a lot of money. And, this is like you're talking about now a general manager. You're talking about a coach that also want to survive. And I think the only way that they can truly survive, well, there's two ways. Let's say they can't move up, they can't trade up, and they can't get the guy that they want. I don't want them settling for somebody just because they want to restart the quarterback position. You want them to be committed to the guy that they want.
And that is my whole point with J.J. McCarthy. And maybe even Drake May, but especially J.J. McCarthy, which is he's the next guy. After the top three go, he's the next guy. So these general managers convince themselves that they love the guy because they need a quarterback more so than them loving the guy.
Well, I'll tell you what they do need. They need an explosive wide receiver. That's for sure.
Yes.
And we all know that. And everybody talks about, offensive line. It's not as if the Jets and the Giants have not tried to fix the offensive line. They have spent a ton of draft capital and free agent money on offensive linemen to try to figure it out. They really, really have. I mean, I could sit here and tell you that if they really want to, there's two tackles that are going to go in the top 10 most likely. They could take one of those two guys. That would be a safe pick. It's not going to excite anybody, but they would be safe picks. The other thing is that there will be 3 wide receivers there, most likely 2 to pick from, because if everything holds, that means, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go to the Cardinals. So now what does the LA Chargers do? What do they do at number 5? Because that is a really interesting one for me. They could trade out of number 5 if, say, the Saints, although I don't necessarily know that they would. Well, the Saints and the Vikings could come up to number 5 and give a haul to get a quarterback that is sitting there.
Yeah, I think that the Chargers, if you listen to Jim Harbaugh, I don't think it's a smokescreen. I think he wants an offensive lineman. I think he wants the best offensive lineman on the board.
Plus their wide receivers.
And no, I understand that, but this is a guy who loves him some offensive line, loves him running the football, also has done magic with quarterbacks. You need weapons, but I'm telling you right now, if you had Jim Harbaugh candidly in front of a microphone, at a bar, wherever, and you could say, with your team that you have right now, you could have the best wide receiver on the board or the best offensive lineman on the board. I guarantee 10 times out of 10, he'd say offensive lineman.
Because that they have been, getting rid of players and kind of depleting the roster, especially a wide receiver, I could see them trading out, especially if there is a quarterback there that people would covet. So let's say J.J. McCarthy is there at 5.
Yeah.
Okay. And, if you're Jim Harbaugh, you want to add, depending what Minnesota is willing to do, depending on what the Broncos are willing to do, or even the Giants are willing to do, that is a spot to me that seems like they could trade and still get top value if they just don't go too far back in the draft. You know what I mean?
I do.
And I don't necessarily know who really affords them that luxury, because teams with multiple draft picks, they're so far apart from each other. But I do believe that there are going to be wide receivers that will be drafted somewhere between 28 and 34 that are going to be top-end wide receivers. That you could still get a top-end wide receiver late in this draft. In the first round, I should say.